Call to order the special meeting on budget training for the trustees for the Niles Main District Library on June 5th, 2024 at 6 p.m.
Okay. President Keene,
Yes, present.
Vice President Trunko,
Here.
Secretary Rosansky,
Here.
Treasurer Botello is absent with prior notice. Trustee Kadir, I have not gotten notice. Trustee Derblick,
Present.
Trustee Schoenfeld.
Here.
Perfect.
All right, please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For public comment, I have Elliot Osherman.
Good evening, Board. This is Elliot Osherman. As usual, I have provided a copy of these comments to your Executive Director for distribution to you so you can follow along. As usual, my 9 declarative statements about not being silenced nor interrupted, nor will we, nor will the community, about remembering the actions of the Board, as will we, as will the community, about voting in the next library election on April 1st, 2025, a mere 9 months and 26 days away, as will we, as will the community. Comments are addressed and directed to the entirety of the Board. References to specific individuals have no names attached. Tonight you are being provided with a training session by a financial advisor on how the Board should construct a budget. It explains your privileges and responsibilities. It also explains the privileges and responsibilities of your Executive Director. I hope you listen carefully, learn, and appreciate the advice and proscriptions. Winston Churchill once said, "Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." As noted above, we will remember the actions of Board members who failed to learn from history, not mentioning any names. Good luck with the budget process. I hope tonight proves informative and useful. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. The next public comment is from Joe McCullough. And before I read this comment, I just want to make a statement. As the board is aware, at the last board meeting, Mr. McCullough had submitted a comment that I did not receive until the following day. He asked me to read that one, not at this meeting, but at the June 19th board meeting. He called me over the phone. So I will read that missed comment at the next board meeting. And this comment reads as follows. Here we go again, the Niles Main Library Board wasting taxpayer dollars on another worthless study because the library director and board appointed treasurer are clueless about budgeting. There is a board member with accounting experience who could produce a budget for the board to consider, adjust to their liking, and vote on. Unfortunately, she is not the board treasurer. This could happen if enough of the board members with common sense were willing to agree to this. If this happens, it's a win for the board, the library, and the taxpayers. In the end, the board majority will approve whatever numbers are decided upon. The library already has a highly qualified public accounting firm and a qualified legal firm engaged whose oversight can be utilized. These are the people to consult on these matters, not an additional consulting firm from the library industrial complex feeding off the taxpayer. This is a library, a source for information and education. I would like to know if the director, treasurer, or any board members have consulted any books pertaining to budgeting or business and financial management on this matter. It's their fiduciary duty to understand budgeting. That's one of the most important jobs of the board and the library director. The presentation of Meristem Advisors is just as worthless as a $30,000 matrix study because it projects the levels of taxes the library can take in, but it doesn't project the fact that library use is in a long-term continuous decline and the budget and tax levy should follow that decline. It also neglects to account for the 2021, 2022, and 2022-2023 budgets and tax levy, which was substantially less than the 2023-2024 budget and levy. These studies all have one thing in common. They tell the board what they want to hear to justify the action they want to take, irregardless of the basic facts which are conveniently omitted. Any senseless projects and wasteful spending can then be blamed on the consultants whose disclaimers say their information is only for discussion. The library trustees were elected by the voters to produce a budget for the library. They have been up to this task in the past. They can do it again without wasting money and time on worthless studies and advice. The board should have known better than to select a director who was incapable of budgeting if they were also unable to produce a budget themselves. The 2024-2025 budget must acknowledge that circulation has declined and is irreversibly declining, and the budget and tax levy also need to decline. These adjustments need to start with this budget year. Library usage doesn't support the current level of library spending. The easiest thing to do would be to take last year's budget and make adjustments to it. That process should start now. This budget year starts in 25 days. If the board is clueless, there's a library of information nearby. Try the adult nonfiction collection and do your job.
Any other public comments?
Yeah, I'm gonna respond to that, because I generally don't make a rule of responding, but I'm going to respond to this, particularly because Mr. McCullough was a board member. Mr. McCullough was a treasurer who put us in a lot of the situations we're in. Mr. McCullough is using the person that was the president at that time, who put us in a lot of the bad situations we're in, as an example, but.
Excuse me, point of
Actually,
information.
excuse me, I am
Point of
making a comment. There is
information.
nothing for you to
Okay.
say any point of
Yes,
information
point of
on it.
Trustee Gerlich,
information.
let
You
him speak.
cannot make general
I
statements.
can,
He's
you
making
did
his-
plenty
Then
last
verify
meeting.
them.
You did plenty
Verify
last
them.
meeting. I could
Point
verify
of
all of it.
information.
Trustee Derblick, let him finish.
I'm requesting point of
And you
information.
have, and it's denied. Let
Follow
him
your
finish.
Robert's rules.
Thank you. Go.
Mr. McCullough did not elect that person that he said would be great at doing budgeting for the budget. They put her in charge of presidency instead. She ignored things left and right, as Mr. McCullough did, as other people on that board did.
Point of information.
It's the last 2 years of videos when you were president.
Point of information. If you're going to make statements, you must justify them.
I am-
that
Okay,
information.
thank you. Continue.
You know what, Valerie, can you please add my name to the list of public comments? And I'd like 3 minutes uninterrupted at the podium. Then there is no point of information or anything else. Now I'm making a public comment as a public individual, not as a trustee.
Okay. Thank you.
Please let me know when my time. Yes, I can.
Ready?
Yes, please. Mr. McCool makes comments very easily with a pen in hand and going from his house instead of coming here and facing any of us. Trustee Derblick wants to sit here and scream point of order when for the last 2 years that she was president.
Point of
she just-
information.
I'm allowed to, excuse me, you
You're
can't
making a
interrupt.
mistake.
You
Trustee
can you
Derblick,
please
you
stop my
can't
time?
interrupt the public
You please stop
comment.
my time. She can't interrupt public comment. Please restart my time. She cannot stop public comment.
Ready?
Yes, please. Trustee Derblick was the president for those 2 years, and they decided to do things the way they wanted to. They put our library in jeopardy with our staff. They turned around and they put a hiring freeze in place when the staff needed to be here. They refused to cooperate with other trustees on the board. They refused to get along with people in the public and other entities in the community, and they went and did whatever they wanted. Mr. McCullough is now talking about what we should do. Well, maybe Mr. McCullough should look back on what he should have done while he was up here, instead of going around foiling everything and costing hundreds of thousands of dollars for lawyers like Trustee Derblick likes to do. Trustee Derblick has a process and a procedure in place, as we do as a whole board, about going to the attorney and everything else, yet she continues to do it without any regard to our taxpayer dollars. So, like Mr. Osherman comes up here constantly, and there's been plenty of others, if we're going to continue to do this, and I'll be the first one to say it since you wanted to call me out at the last board meeting, I did say in executive session that we all needed to work together, Carolyn. However, as multiple people in here saw, your attacks on me last meeting and your attacks on the board is not working together. You don't want to work together with people on this board. You are interested in hurting our community and hurting our library, and that's a shame. Because if you actually used your knowledge for good, it's amazing what you could do. Instead, you rather use your knowledge for being snark and cocky and arrogant because you've been on this board. So I hope you enjoy your next 10 months, because it's going to be your last 10 months on this board, because you're not going to get elected, and because nobody wants somebody that's going to hurt the community. You want to hurt the community. Thank you for your time.
Okay, and I will respond.
Point of order.
Trustee Trunco?
Point of order.
Trustee
Point of
Trunco.
order.
I'm
gotta
responding
get up to
to
make public
public
comment.
comments.
Go
Point of
stand at
order
the-
is allowed.
Stand up there
No,
so
but
that way
if you can
he
make a
won't
response
argue
to a
you.
public comment.
Stand
you
up by
can't.
Well, I would,
the, and do
though.
a
She would've
public
let me.
comment, so this way he can't stop you.
Can we just move them, what's this not even why we're here tonight?
Okay,
We're
I
here
don't
for a
really care.
financial-
The fact of the
No, I
matter
know you
is,
don't, but-
President Keene, you cannot and he cannot make blatant statements that are just one lie after another.
But you have
If
done
you
that
have a
before.
complaint,
As a,
Remember,
you
I said
have a
we're gonna vote
complaint-
on that.
if you have a
10-minute
complaint
recess.
about my
Take a vote,
presidency
please.
and my
We're
budgetary
gonna prove everything,
items,
ladies.
President
bring
Keane?
them
Yes.
here.
Vice
Bring
President
them here.
Trumbull?
sure.
Secretary Rosansky?
Yes.
Trustee Kadir?
Yes.
Trustee Derblick?
I have no idea what you're
10-minute
doing. You were
recess.
speaking while I was speaking.
Of
I was
course.
asked to
What
take
you
a
do
vote
is
on a
fine.
10-minute recess.
Okay, once again,
Yes
according
or
to,
no?
according to Robert's
That's it.
rules, you're
Abstain.
not
Trustee
supposed to
Schoenfeld?
prevent the minorities from speaking, and
All
you
right,
do
we
it
have a
every
quorum. We
month.
have a 10-minute recess at 6:11. Thank you.
We'll go back on, I'll talk later.
Okay, I
But
will
it's cool.
continue my response to trustee Trunko's, public comments, or do we need to take a roll call again?
No, do we?
No, but.
Okay, wonderful. Trustee Trunko, you, were spouting out comments about the hiring freeze with no justification. As a matter of fact, when you were running for office, you claimed you were very interested in looking at the details that would justify we were not causing any disruption in the library because we had more than ample hours in every department, and I was able to prove that. You told me that once you were elected, you would like to see that. And I told you, if you really want to see them, contact me. You've been on the board for a year, and I've not heard from you. Regarding the budget and your
That's
accusations,
inaccurate, considering you
budget
just said that
I
last
ran-
month
the budget I
contacted you.
ran with the
You're gonna
years
give it
I
2
was
minutes.
president was based on facts, documented, and every single item that was on that budget was compared to usage and the current status of the economy, along with what staff wanted increased, with no guarantee next year would be better. So our budget wasn't notorious as you make it sound to be. And lastly, your volatile and vulgar threats to the female trustees that you, with your local and state politicians, will make sure that none of them are elected is indicative of your unprofessional demeanor. And you continue with your outbursts constantly, and yes, I will call you every time you don't use facts required to justify your false statements.
President Keene, I
Yes.
would like to have that move to be stricken from the record, considering there was no threats made to anybody on this board. I would like that to be stricken from the record and removed.
I believe you mentioned executive session, and I just elaborated.
I
So,
didn't,
we're not allowed to talk about what happens in closed session,
President
but
Keene,
you've done that a
I
couple
would,
times
I
now.
would still
It's
stand
not
by
a
my
confidential
request.
matter.
I still stand by my request.
That's
There was
fine.
no
I have no
threats
problem
made,
with that.
and I would like that clear for the public that there were no threats made as well.
Oh, really? Should we play the
Okay,
tape
we're
for the
not here
public?
to argue and
Public,
we have a
that's-
professional here that we are paying, so
Please,
let's
we're
please
paying-
move on with the
Exactly,
meeting.
and
Give
if you
us
want to
the
move
training.
forward, I'm ready for that as well.
Great, let's move forward.
Okay.
Thank you for waiting, Jamie.
Okay, and Jamie, before you proceed, I do have to make a statement because I have,
No, this
No,
is not on the agenda, this is not part
no,
of the
there's
meeting.
some terms and conditions that I can't agree with, and I just
No.
want to get it out in the
No,
open.
not now.
No. This is, we're paying him for
He's here to
his
present, let
time.
him
Well, I'm
present.
hoping
Let's
in
do
his
this.
presentation, he can justify my
Well,
concerns.
why don't you wait for him to do the presentation, and then if
And
there
then
are
you have
questions at the
questions.
end, you can ask.
Then I'll make this statement then?
As an individual, not as a board.
Absolutely
Statement.
not,
Well,
absolutely
you'd like
not.
to do that, an email to our executive director and call her out, so
Alright.
I want to make sure you understand that too.
Again, point of information.
Would you like me to read
All
the
right,
email? It's
Hey,
public
trustees,
information.
come, that's enough, that is enough.
You
Let us
attack
just get
him.
We're
along.
trying
You
to
attack
say
our
that
director.
we're here for a training,
I know, here
please.
goes that volatile personality.
We're here for a training.
Just
President
because
Keene,
your
I'm going to ask
voice,
you to go to
just
a,
because your voice is low, trustee Durblick, does not mean that you are not volatile or aggressive,
I
because
am
you
not.
are.
He's
Please.
I'm asking
threatening.
to go to another recess, please. I'm not going to sit through a training if this is how I'm going to be treated, and the incorrect facts are going to be put out here on the board to the public, where she's going to make false accusations. Either we as a board need to censor her, or we need to do something for the fact of what she's doing. This cannot continue how she's doing this to the board. She's done this for the last 3 years to everybody. We cannot allow this as a board. Our public deserves better. We were voted in to do better than what she's allowing us to do right now. So I'm asking the board to either censor her, go to a recess, and make sure that these comments have been removed, stricken from the record since they're inaccurate and false, or we don't move forward
All
tonight.
right, so would you like to make a motion for or do we have to make a motion for recess? And we have to vote on it.
I'd like to make a motion to censor trustee Dribble.
You can't censor somebody.
Yes, you can.
Okay, so the procedure to censor someone then is you have to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to censor trustee Dribble
Based on what?
Yeah, you have to give a reason.
for your actions and inaccurate statements causing.
Specify, please, no
I-
generalities.
If you
Okay,
would
let
let
him
me
speak.
speak, this is not your board where you can continue to bully people like you did for years, Carolyn.
I
okay?
don't bully, I'm asking for a
My
clarification.
clarification is you made multiple inaccurate comments about a fellow trustee on this board being myself. You sat there and lied out of your mouth about a
Point of
fellow trustee.
information.
Point of information is what you just said 2 minutes ago.
You have to state the
Okay, let
purpose
him
of the
finish,
censure.
okay?
He's just rambling.
Well, you're out of order now, so let him finish.
Okay.
You just put the motion with some examples and the time,
Okay.
okay?
I would like to make a motion to censor trustee Driblick based on the fact of inaccurate comments, false comments made towards other,
tonight?
during this meeting, false comments made towards other trustees, and unprofessional behavior in a board setting.
Okay, what is the difference between this
Okay, now-
generality and the last one?
Now,
What specific
okay, if you're not
comments?
happy with the motion, that's fine, you're gonna have a vote on it, okay?
You can't censor someone without a purpose.
Can we please just go to our training?
He's
This
saying that
time
you
is
made
being
false
wasted.
comments
Okay,
tonight.
what was false? That's what I'm asking. Put it in
That-
here, because this
that
needs to
you-
go to another
that
level.
he was aggressive, and what would you say about the way whatever he did to women, is that what
Oh,
you're
the
referring to?
statement he made to us?
Yes,
Okay, so he's claiming the statement I made about his vulgarity was incorrect.
I don't know, you wrote it down, so I'm sure you have it there.
So, and what else is there? Because I can prove all this. I don't have a problem. What else is he claiming is incorrect?
Unprofessional behavior on the board.
What was that?
Everything you've done up
Asking for
until
point of
tonight.
information?
No.
Every meeting.
Point
that
of
you've been in.
information, is that what you call?
What you're doing right now.
I know, I'm
still
asking
is.
what he means. Is point of information the problem?
I have to answer to the president of the board. not
Okay,
to-
I would
Trustee-
say that the unprofessional behavior, and this is just my observation of tonight, is everything you've done since you walked into this boardroom tonight.
So point of information is a problem for him, is that what you're
No.
saying?
No, we're saying your behavior for the last
Am I
half hour has
disagreeing
been
with him?
unprofessional.
Cutting
I'm
off a member
disagreeing.
of the public making
And
a
we're
public
arguing
comment.
about it. So I think there is a motion on the table that we can now vote on, and at the end, then trustee Derblick, you will have time to speak.
No, the motion has to be seconded,
Oh,
and then the
okay.
motion has to be discussed.
Valerie, do you have what you need written down?
Mhm.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Do we call the vote first or discussion?
No,
first?
discussion first.
Okay, I'm asking for clarification, because I can't use generalities to take this a step further.
You
So-
have made false comments tonight about what just trustee Trunko said in closed session, and you have exhibited unprofessional behavior since you walked in the room.
Okay, and what was unprofessional?
I don't have to give any more specifics. You can watch the video to see yourself if you need to.
Well, if you think requesting point of information is incorrect, or is
Not
that's the
requesting a point of
unprofessional?
infor- Hold on. Let me try to, a lot of people are hot here. If you allow me to speak uninterrupted, I can point out what is bringing this about. Last meeting, you went after trustee Tunko in a very, very personal way, repeatedly throughout the meeting.
About,
I can give you specific comments if I went
okay,
back and
if you
listened.
could share that with me?
But what I can say, I can remember a couple of them. In one instance, trustee Trunko made a statement about something,
And what
critical of something you said, and your
Oh.
response to him was,
Mhm.
trustee, it was either Trunko or trustee Trunko, you're really,
Oh, being immature.
you said something to the effect, you're really going tonight, in a very condescending, chiding way that none of us should be speaking to, and
But
any of
his
us.
comment to me,
His comment to
fine.
you
Let
was,
him
his
finish.
comment to you.
no, please
Hold on.
justify the
His comment
difference.
to you was based on the facts of what you said, and he was disagreeing with what you said. And then you personalized it by going after him. You did that at least 3 or 4 times. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to escalate anything. But after the fact, I was very, very surprised that trustee Trunko maintained his cool and didn't respond to you in the moment.
Remember that.
And now, next meeting, what is it, 3 weeks later?
Well, also at
You're
that
just
meeting-
continuing to go after him.
Also at that meeting, you told him he was impossible, and the reason
No,
that he was the
immature
problem
is
on
the
board.
word I remember.
Well, I went back and watched it, and I emailed it to you, so you're aware.
I don't remember getting an email to you, but that's because I got so many. But anyway, I can watch the video myself.
So the next thing you did today,
So are we
trustee,
using that document for this censure?
Yes, it's illegal. It's from,
Okay, then if I could have a copy of that when you're done, I'd appreciate it. Then we don't even have to have this conversation.
document?
Well, she's using it for this censure, and I'm just asking for a copy of it.
What document?
Whatever, she just said she's using what you're reading for the censure, and I'm asking, please provide me a copy
Sure,
of it.
I can
That's
do that.
all.
okay, then can we move on? I think we're ready for a vote then.
Ready for a vote? Okay. President Keene,
Yes.
Vice President Trunko,
Yes.
Secretary Rosansky,
Pass for now.
Trustee Kadir,
Yes.
Trustee Derblick,
No.
Trustee Schoenfeld.
No.
Okay, so
Trustee Rosansky needs to vote.
Trustee Rosansky,
Okay, yes.
okay.
And what's the vote?
The vote is 4-2 passes.
Trustee Kadir, I don't know if you feel comfortable giving the board, just so that we all understand the significance and what a censure really is.
A censure is essentially a statement by the board that a particular trustee is acting inappropriately for a trustee, and that the specific behavior and actions are objectionable and not in congruence and compliance with the way a board should function.
Thank you. And with that, I hope and think that we are ready for Jamie. to present.
Please, can we start?
Thank you again, Jamie,
Thank you.
for coming out. If you don't mind introducing yourself before you get started, I
Sure.
appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. So Jamie Racklin, I'm with Meristem Advisors, which is my own company. I started about 6 years ago. I won't spend too much time talking about the company, but I was a municipal finance banker for about 25 years, working with my municipal clients on their borrowings. And throughout that time, clients kept asking me questions about things like budgeting and financial matters and financial planning, to the point where I felt like I was only serving a portion of my clients' needs, and so I started my own company, and that turned out to be a smart thing to do, because it seems like most of what I do now is the type of thing that I'm working with you on tonight, which is sort of, as much as we're often in charge of $4 and $10 and $20 million budgets, it actually is amazing how often people sort of don't think deeply about those steps that are taken to come up with a proper budget or take the proper financial steps. And so this kind of thing happens all the time for me, in terms of being called in to talk about budgeting, to talk about how to approach budgeting. And then tonight, in the bigger context of how boards work together and what the board's role is in that process, so that it's clear, where your responsibilities start and end, and where sort of administration and staff take over. And so that's by way of background. There was a mention about a disclaimer somewhere along the line. Yes, we use all kinds of facts and assumptions. This isn't advancing is the problem. Let's see.
You were on the disclaimer. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So in my analysis, using assumptions, you have to recognize assumptions change. So that's basically what the disclaimer says. So things that we're talking about are valid tonight. Oh, maybe that's the better way to do it. Oh, thank you.
I just popped the control
Okay.
out.
We'll see how it goes. So anyway, last month, I watched a little of the presentation from last month. Oh my gosh, it just keeps going back. Here, let's just go out of this and we'll do it the normal way. I think, that'll be better. And you had this hourglass concept, which you may remember, which is the traditional go-to sort of metaphor for how boards and staff work. And if you recall, the way that worked was sort of the board is at one end, setting the big picture kind of policy type of thing, and overseeing the overall activities of the library, again, from the 30,000-foot level. The library director sits in the middle, interprets those directions, and gives direction to the staff, and the staff actually follows through and does the actual implementation of the vision of the board. And so what we're gonna try and do tonight is apply that image, which is used, in board training very often, to this budgeting finance function that we're gonna talk about specifically. So now, as much as that hourglass analogy works and is used quite often, I think a better analogy might be this concept of a ladder, which is where you're the board, you're holding that ladder, right? You support the ladder as the board so that the staff, everybody else can work on the ladder and can work on the wall. And if you think about it, the reason I like this metaphor is because if you guys as a board start climbing the ladder is gonna follow. Somebody has to hold the ladder, and that's your job as a board, so that everybody else can do their job effectively. If no one's holding the ladder, the library's not gonna function. Okay, so let's talk about specifically roles and responsibilities of the library board from that standpoint of holding the ladder. So first of all, you have a fiduciary duty as a board member to the library. Now remember, you are elected by the community. But even though you're elected by the community, your fiduciary duty is to the library. Okay? And do you understand that difference? That is to say, the community put you here to look after the library. They did not put you here to proactively look after whatever they happen to want to do. You're here on the board to look after the library. That's your responsibility. So functionally, that means implementing the appropriation and the levy, taking care of the revenue side of the equation, setting clear expectations for the district's financial health. What does financial health for the library look like? You have a role in setting expectations for that. Outlining budget priorities, so when the budget comes to you, are we spending enough here? Are we not spending enough there? Can we do things differently for the community if we rearrange the budget a little bit? Setting priorities, establish financial strategy. Where do we want to be going over the long term? Because even though the budget is a one-year thing, you need to be thinking long term, and we're going to be talking about that quite a bit as well. And then you have to monitor things, right? It's one thing to pass a budget, but then you want to know how you're doing against that budget, how things are progressing over the course of the year and over the course of the years, plural. And then lastly, you have some policies. It's your job to keep those policies fresh, to review them, to make sure they're up to date, and to make sure that they make sense in the context of those strategic objectives that you have. So tonight we're going to talk very specifically about a few different areas in the context of those two metaphors, the hourglass and the ladder, specifically the budget, the levy. We'll talk about fund balance and financial policies with respect to spending, investments, fund balances, and then how do you monitor financial performance as time goes on. So that said, let's start with the budget, okay? And just big picture again. Conceptually you kind of know this, but I think it helps to just explicitly say it. Why is the budget so important? Well, it's your plan for the coming year, right? It's not just, oh, whatever we did last year, we'll do it again. It sets your priorities relative to the previous year. So you're looking, when you're setting up your budget, what did we do last year? How's that inform what we want to do this year? What was successful? What wasn't? Where do we need to reallocate? It allows you to make decisions regarding financial results. So let's say you look at your numbers and you're spending more than you're taking in. Or the opposite could happen. You could be taking in more than you're spending. What does that mean? What does that look like? Do you have to make adjustments along the way so that over the long term, as you look ahead, you're maintaining financial health? And that could go either way. And by the way, we're not going to get into analysis tonight. I'm going to show you a bunch of numbers that relate to you, but no conclusions here, because these are can't walk into a situation without knowing what's going on and make recommendations or make suggestions. But what we're going to do is we're going to look in a minute at your numbers, right? And see what they look like and see what kinds of questions you might be asking as you approach this coming budget, okay? And then as you go through the year, you want to compare what you budgeted to what's actually going on for a bunch of reasons. Make sure you're not overspending is the one that everybody always thinks about. But maybe in certain areas you're not spending enough. Maybe you had a goal of spending a certain amount of money on materials or accomplishing a certain project and it's not happening. And you can look where you are and say, this is what we laid out as our vision, why is it not happening? And then most importantly, what I like you to, on that big picture concept, is bear in mind, the budget, that's a reflection of your strategic vision because it says where you're putting your resources and how many resources you're generating, right? And so I'd always have you think in terms of strategy when you're looking at the budget. And I would also say, if you don't have a strategic plan, right, that takes away half the equation of your ability to look at the budget. And I think you have a strategic plan sort of in the
On the
coming
horizon.
on the horizon.
Yes.
And all I'm going to say, so I'm not castigating you for not having a, but it is super important, right? Is to look at that long term. We're going to see all of this again. Believe me, we're going to beat a couple of dead horses by the time we're done. Okay, so big picture now, right? So this is board roles and board training, right? So big picture. Where is the library board coming from when it comes to the budget? These are the questions that I would have you be asking. First of all, is this realistic picture? Is it a realistic picture of what you're bringing in and spending? Okay, so are you looking at the revenues? Does that sound about right? You're looking at the spending. Does that look about right? Is it realistic? And I'll give you an example just real quick. There's a tendency, most places inflate the budget, right? They're like, we're going to allow for lots of room here and lots of spending here. And then during the year, they underspend the budget. They go, oh, that's great, right? We way underspent the budget. Aren't we doing great? But in reality, you kind of should be overspending the budget here and there, right? Because there should be some actual control. There should be actual information there in your budget about what your plans were. Then, well, I'm going to hold off on another comment until a little bit later, okay? Is it demonstrating and contributing to our financial health? So let me give you an example there, and we'll see it in a minute. Let's say you're generating, I'll do it this way, a big surplus, okay? What are you doing with that surplus? There's all kinds of things you could be doing with a budget surplus. Are there things you could be doing to serve the community better? Do you have enough financial resources in reserve in case something goes wrong? Is there a project that needs to be done that would help fulfill the strategic plan, like a renovation or a renewal of the library? So that's one possibility. And then one possibility sometimes happens, you just have too much money. We can't spend it fast enough. So maybe under that circumstance, you can start thinking about, well, maybe, there are places to trim. All possibilities, but you can't really answer the question unless you have that long-term financial view of what's going on and sort of a projection. Does it achieve our policy objectives, and our strategic objectives? I think I'm sort of repeating myself here, but you get the point. You're looking at the budget in the context of what you're trying to accomplish. And then during the year, you're constantly looking. Every month, you'll get a report. You should look at it. Where are we overspending? Where are we underspending? And you can ask those questions about why are we high here? Why are we low there? What's going on? And then the last thing is follow the statutory requirements for passing. And I crossed out budget and put appropriation here because one of your jobs as trustee is to pass the appropriation each year. We'll talk about this in a minute, but the appropriation is not the budget. And a lot of the times there's confusion about that. The appropriation, when we get to it, well, I'm going to end up doing the page ahead of time. The appropriation is an allowance for the maximum you'll spend on any given item during the year. So the appropriation is the maximum of every single line, right? And you add them all up, you're going to get like a super maximum. So the appropriation is just sort of like this artifice in a way that's required by law, establishing outer limits for anything you're going to spend. It's not what you actually expect to spend. Your B&A is kind of nice because you put a budget column and you put an appropriation column. And that's what, so you don't have to put that budget column, but it's nice to have it there. Just a reminder. This is our budget, this is what we're allowing to happen. And so when you see that in the budget and appropriation, it's kind of useful. Okay, meanwhile, what's the library director doing with the budget? And this is I just want to get in your heads, separating where your role ends and where the library director takes over. The library director is going to be responsible for really nailing down what those revenue and expenditure items are. how much can we really expect to come in? You know, what's gonna happen with book sales next year? What's gonna happen with our tax levy next year based on the levy that we file? You know, that's her concern. And as long as, and you've hired her to have comfort and faith in her ability to do that, right? And so you want to make sure she's reporting that, you know, you want to have confidence that she's reporting that accurately, but you're taking that information and doing all the other things we were talking about. Making sure the library receives all revenues to which is entitled. So she's down there digging around, looking for revenue, making sure that people are paying their fines and things when they're supposed to, and make sure that that's all happening, and those things. Monitoring and adjusting expenditures so they stay within budget. So let's say you see something going awry, right? Then it's her job to go find out why that's not happening. Why, you know, we're not spending enough on books this year when we had a plan to do so, or, you know, why some other budget line is running over, or a project is running over cost. That would be her job to figure out why and get that back under control. Let's see, yeah, so ensure controls are followed to prevent misuse of funds. Now, this is a big one, okay, because financial controls, every library needs good financial controls, all right? And as long as your policies, kind of getting ahead of myself here, but as long as your policies establish good financial controls, your role is to make sure those rules are in place. Her role is to make sure they're followed. Okay? So you want to know, you might ask questions like, what are our financial controls? How do we know that money isn't leaking from the system? And the best way to do that is not sort of ad hoc, but in a controlled manner. Like, you can take care of a lot of this stuff. This is true just generally. Have an interest in financial controls? Let's have a meeting about financial controls, okay? Where you can really focus in on it. As opposed to, say, you know, individually calling something out. You know, did we do this right? Well, you know, that's getting into the weeds, as opposed to, let's have a meeting about financial controls and understand how do we make sure things are going appropriately. Okay, I think.
Jamie, question for
yes,
you.
please.
In your experience, or would you suggest that while we go through a budget process, would you suggest maybe 6 months through you have that type of meeting as a full board, so that we could check to see where we are, like a checks and balance system?
Yeah, that's entirely up to you. It's independent, I think, right? Like, this would be one of the, there's a million things you could have a meeting about, right? If you were interested. You might be interested in how are we serving our youth, right? You could have, you know, but if there's an item that's of in particular interest to you as a board, say, hey, let's have a special meeting, you know, and have someone come in and explain this to us, because it's really bothering us. I don't know if money's leaving. I'm all of a sudden worried about this. Okay. It's not urgent, because you can have some pretty good faith from your library director that things are under control. But if you're like worried about something or interested in something, have a meeting, you know, and just say, that's it. That'd be an interesting thing to talk about. Let's, you know, or at the start of the board meeting. Anyway, you can figure out how to do it
Jimmy, can I
yourself.
just ask for clarification? Our budget document actually lists every single line item under each category, and it has the budget amount, and then we can see from month to month exactly where we are in that budget process, so we know that we're not spending as much as we had budgeted for, or maybe we're spending more. So we're aware of that every month. But this conversation you're suggesting that we have is to...
Different conversation. I wasn't recommending a conversation at all. I was giving an example,
okay.
right, with the financial controls of saying, if, and I just happened to pull that one out of a million of them, right? I'm just saying, if there's something in particular that you have an interest in, right, as a board, rather than delving into sort of, you know, because it happened to come up in a meeting, organizing that, or organizing a meeting around that subject. You know, like, just say, okay, we want to know about this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's table that. Good
Sure.
concerns, valid concerns. Let's have a meeting and just talk about it.
Okay.
You know, and hear
I
about it.
understand.
That's all I was getting at.
Okay.
And we're going to see your budget numbers in a minute,
Okay,
because
great.
the point you made there, it actually becomes very relevant. Okay. And then, so other things the library director's thinking about is, things like, is this giving me opportunities to enhance services? Again, going back to that strategic plan, where do I want to spend the money? I have this budget line for youth, okay? Where's it actually going? What books are we buying? That gets down to the micro level of who are those books directed to? Is that someone we want to encourage to use the library more? Is it someone who's coming in every day and we just don't have enough for them? That's a hard, that's her decision.
That's
It's
her-
not your decision.
That is not,
Exactly.
exactly, you're going, and I'm saying that's not our
Okay.
decision, that's her decision and her department chair's decision.
So up at the budget level, you're saying, hey, it seems like we should spend a lot more money on youth. And she's saying, yeah, okay, that's great, let's do it. And then she figures out where it goes.
Yes,
And then how do you budget? There's different ways to budget too. You could just increase everything 3% for last year, yay. Or you can really go to the manager and say, hey, how did you budget that last year? I need you to justify your budget this year because I think we spent too much or too little. Different approaches, that's her job. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. This was fascinating. This is your 23 results. This is you now, okay? These are your 2023 results, your budget for 2024, so not this year. And if I don't look too closely,
Excuse me, I just
Yes,
need to
please.
clarify. Okay, it looks like you use fiscal year, and I'm familiar
Yeah.
with you use calendar year, and I'm familiar with fiscal. So when you say 24,
I'm sorry, yes.
it's
so-
okay. Which do you mean?
So this
24,
is
25?
fiscal year. This is fiscal year 2023. So I'm sorry, I
Ending
refer to
in
it fiscal
23.
year 2023, so ending June 30th, 2023, yes.
Okay, thank
This
you.
is fiscal
Okay.
year and the fiscal year budget.
I thought
Exactly.
so, but I
Okay.
thought
Yep,
I'd better
yep,
ask.
yep.
All right,
Okay,
thank
no,
you.
thank you for asking. Okay, so if I look real quick, okay, I look at the revenues, because my eye always goes total revenues, pretty much flat, right? Okay, so that's nice. And then I go down to total expenses. See, wow, total expenses going up 2.8 million, 2.7 million. That's a big jump. So where did that come from? And then so that's an incongruity that just like my eye would just go to, and they go, oh, wait a minute, we have $1.2 million of capital expenditures, $1.3 million of capital expenditures. So you got to back that out. That's still an increase of 1.6 million, so that's a lot. Where's that going on, right? And it's kind of across the board, but big jump in salaries. I'm not calling anything out here. I'm just telling you how I look at it. And I know for a fact, because we talked about it, you had reasons for all of this, but I'm just saying how I look at it. And then I noticed that my revenues include $1.3 million to match off that capital expenditure. So in reality, what looked originally like level revenues is actually a drop of 1.2 million. So you have a lot going on here, right, to parse if you're looking at this board. Yeah, so you can see your other revenue goes from 115 to $1.3 million. That's because you matched off that capital expenditure with revenue from your special reserve. You took reserves to match off that capital expenditure. And so if you pull that out, because that's one-time revenue, you can't count on that over and over again, right? You're looking at revenues that drop from 6.3 million down to 5.1 million. So now you're looking at a drop in revenue. So there's a lot going on here. And so you really want to understand what's going on. One of the things I like to do is, and I would recommend this for you, is keep those capital expenditures, those one-time expenditures separate. Because they're one time and they're big, they can be very disruptive to seeing what's going on. So you can have them, you have a reserve. In fact, that's how you account for this stuff. If you go to your audited financial statements, you would not see that revenue there, because that's not revenue. In fact, it's cash balance, it's use of fund balance. And you wouldn't see that capital expenditure there because it's coming out of your special revenue fund. So if you pull that out, it would look more like this. Okay, this is the same. Wait, let me make sure that I didn't skip it. Sorry. Yeah, this is the same thing. This is the exact same numbers, but with the capital expenditures pulled out.
So you're recommending not including the special reserves?
You would include them in your budget. You would just include them separately. Right, so
Don't
you,
show them on our,
On revenue, because
Just
it's not new
because it's
revenue.
not really revenue, it's just a different, I'm not saying you ignore anything.
Okay.
I'm just saying you pull them out and show them separately, for all kinds of reasons that we could
so
talk
we
about.
show them on revenue now, isn't that because we have that money?
Yeah, but it's
in-
not revenue, right? It's cash that you own.
So.
It's like saying I own a house, that's revenue. You
So
wouldn't do
how
that.
should it be reported as opposed to being eliminated?
So it all gets reported. If you go to your financial statements,
Mm-hmm,
you'll see on your balance sheet,
that's
you'll see
true.
cash.
That's,
And that's your fund balances.
okay,
And
that's
that's
true.
where that appears.
So special reserves are part of the fund balances.
Special reserve would be, you have in
A
your
category,
financial,
don't we?
you have a fund. You have
Mhm.
specifically
For
a
each
fund
one, okay.
for special reserve.
Right,
Then you have a bunch of other funds that are mixed in here, but they're less important, so I don't worry about that. But the special reserve, that's a big thing, you know? And so now, having pulled those out, right, I can see a little more clearly what's going on, okay? I can see that the revenue, your actual cash income is dropping 1.2 million. And I can say, why is that? And you have an answer for that, by the way, makes perfect sense. But it calls attention to it, whereas before you might not have said, like, what's going on? Before you would have said, oh, we're fine, revenue's revenue, no problem. Now you're going like, wait a minute, what happened? Our revenue dropped $1 million. And then on the expense side, same thing, you can see, yep, expenses going up there, and you can see net ordinary income still negative 1.4 million. So even after accounting for that project, you're still spending 1.4 million, which doesn't take long to figure if this is the trend. If this is repeating, we're not gonna have much money for much longer. Now, skip ahead, right? We know that the levy went up, right? We know that that 1.4 million is not gonna repeat. How much? Did you do a projection? If you didn't, how do you know, right? Is that 1.4 million gonna go away? You know, this is where it all comes together. If you don't look ahead, you can't do this stuff year by year. I'm gonna keep hammering on that.
So Jamie, looking at
As we
that,
go
right,
through.
so 1.4, let's even call it 1.5, you know, let's round up to 1.5 just for easy access to numbers that we're gonna speak to. You know, we know the total salaries are up $775,000. We understand there was a union negotiation, you know, extra things that happened throughout that. So that's not gonna happen every single year, that we're gonna have a lot of back pay and things of that nature
Right.
for the last 2 years. There's gonna be increases, of course, in salaries, because there
Yes.
should be every year, plus the contract states that. But we're not gonna have that big jump every single year. We did raise the levy up,
Yes.
plus a percentage on top of that.
Yeah.
So when you start factoring that new number in, that's where it all, like, it's one of those things that it sort of takes care of itself now that we got that new levy back and plus the increase.
It might, but how do you, my point is,
But
Well,
how
no,
do you
no,
know?
and this is the
Okay.
same thing that I brought up when I first got
Yeah.
on this board, is nobody's projected multiple years out
So,
to do this. We
we're-
need a 3, 4 year, 5-year plan with this money
Exactly.
behind.
So we're gonna get there. Now, we're gonna get there in this presentation, in fact. Okay, so now, so he had this budget and everybody got their arms around it. And now we're gonna look at the budget versus, this is, I think, April, annualized, what's actually happening, right? So now during the year, and I would hope like after 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, you're starting to look at this stuff. If we take your performance year-to-date March and then annualize it, or April, whatever it is, by grossing it up for the full year, we can start to see, okay, I'm starting to feel a little bit better because that negative 1.4 million is now looking like it actually might be positive. And again, your project's not in here. I don't know if you actually did that project or not. Everybody can
No.
bring a big sigh of relief. So that money's still there, still held for that project whenever it happens, right?
And it's a lot less than what that 1.2 was supposed to be. It's now down to, I believe, under 300,000.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
So,
something like that.
Roughly around there.
500.
so
3
we
to
can,
500.
so we factor that in. But okay, but our salaries, you know, are actually running behind budget. So they did go up 600,000, but not all the way. Materials, you're underspending by $150,000. Now, there's a couple reasons that could be. One is that everybody makes their materials purchases at the very end of the year, waits till the last second when they have their budget left.
Sort of.
Another possibility is we're not spending enough. And to serve, again, the goal is to be a fiduciary to the library. It's not to look at that number and say, see, we don't need to spend money on materials because we just don't spend it. A different perspective on that would be, hey, wait a minute. We have money here to serve the community. I don't know if it's true or not, but there was a comment made in reference in the thing you read, I think, circulation is declining. So one question would be, maybe circulation is declining if it's true. I don't know. I'm not digging into weeds here, so don't, okay? This is just generally. But this is one of the questions you might have. Maybe it's because we don't have the right materials to serve a portion of the public, and if we had those materials, if we were hitting those numbers, boy, circulation would be going through the roof because all of a sudden everybody would be recognizing that we're here for those reasons, right? You could chase circulation in a spiral downward just by providing less and less and less stuff, right? Or your strategic objective might be to improve circulation by providing more materials, and you can see that continues. Operating expenditures, that's kind of nice. I don't know what's included there, but you're underspending, so maybe it's costing less. General and administration, again, maybe those are areas where it's nice to underspend, where you could reallocate those resources. So anyway, this is just a long, rambling discussion to say, another aspect of this is, how is it exactly we were $1.7 million off between our budget and our actual? Right, that's another way to think about this. Did we do a good job on our budgeting this year? Or was that actually a bad job because we thought we were gonna lose $1.4 million and it's turning out we might be 300,000
Jamie, these
positive.
numbers, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Are from end of May?
End of April. I think.
April, so we still have 2 months.
You have 2 months to go.
They're actual.
Yeah, they're actual, but we'll update, right? At the end of the year, you'll review, and this'll help inform the.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not judging here, right?
No,
I
I know, I'm
hope it's
just
not coming
clarifying.
across that
No,
I'm judging because
not
I
at all.
don't know answers to a lot of these
Not at
questions. On the other hand, you could look at those revenues and you could see investment income, $497,000, which is spectacular. Congratulations. But interest rates are also 4%, 5%, right? And you know that's not going to repeat. So that's going to eat in over time into some of that income. Other revenue is up. I don't know what's in there. You have to dig into some of these things. Per capita, you must have gotten a boost in your per capita because of population. Does that sound right?
I'm not sure why, but
Yeah.
I know we got a boost.
And then replacement taxes have gone through the roof, and that's been a couple of years. You might have been able to anticipate that one higher. Everybody's projecting that they'll come down a little, but probably not back to 180. You could probably start relying on a little more replacement taxes. But anyway, these are the questions, right? That's her job, is to do that. It's your job to ask questions about that. Why are you projecting 180?
So
Could we go a little
question
further?
for you, just to clarify for everybody out there watching and everybody in here, the budget 2024 column is 10 months into the budget. That's what we should be looking at. Is 3,421,598 for like total salaries, but we're at 3.3 million, correct? So the number in the budget is going to continue to go up.
No. That's grossed up.
Oh, that's grossed up. Okay, so
So
that's not.
Yeah, that's
Sure.
projected through
Okay.
the end of the year.
Okay.
The left column.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the left column, budget 2024, is the budget that was actually approved for this year. The
Okay.
middle column, 2024 annualized,
Is
is
where
the
we are.
projected where we will be at the end of June 30th.
Assuming that
Oh,
our spending
it's the
continues at
projected-
the current
Yeah.
rate.
Projected,
Yeah,
okay.
assuming everything stays as it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
You keep spending at the rates you're going. And you'll update us. You'll look at this at the end, and it helps inform the budgeting process for next year.
So, and I'll ask a hot button question for you. So looking at it like this though, you're closer to a balanced budget where we were on this than when we're gonna actually get that new tax levy plus the increase, because then based off of these numbers, we would be way over.
Correct, but that begs all those other questions that I'm
Why?
encouraging you to ask, which is, are we serving the community? I know these numbers are way down from where they were, a few years ago.
Yep.
We're gonna talk about the levy in a minute. See, it's complicated. I mean, it really is complicated, and there's a lot of moving pieces, and that's your job as a board, is to think about those moving pieces and how they work together. More so than, for lack of a better thing, what book you buy.
And what I've been doing as I'm meeting with the department heads, talking about budget, is talking about what our goals might be as far as, if you are asking me that you want to hire a new staff member, what service will that particular position provide to the community, so that I can then bring that to the board and say, if we want to reopen to our old hours, for example, this is the level of staffing we're requesting. If we want to do more classes, this is the level of staffing we're requesting. If we want to buy more books in a certain area, this is the increase that we're requesting. So that's the stuff that I'm going through that then I will bring to the board on a higher level for big picture thinking.
Exactly, and so for lack of, again, I should be careful because I know, you just made me realize this is being recorded, so I don't want to throw numbers that are gonna go around somewhere. But if, and then be repeated as fact, but if you're seeing an increase in revenue of, we'll call it X, okay, how's that sound? Then it's Valerie's job to say, how are we going to spend X responsibly so that you feel comfortable? Again, I'm going back to this idea that you are fiduciaries of the library.
But it's
Right.
our job as a board, though, when we sit down and we talk about, like, for instance, the levy and things of that nature, to ask those questions, and
Exactly.
if we're way underspending, it's our job to the community and to the library to make sure that we don't create X, a surplus on that as well, or put X burden on the taxpayer as well.
Exactly, except that, and so this is where some of this sort of conflicting objectives and goals come in. One of your questions with respect to that should be, okay, Valerie, how can we responsibly deploy that money, those resources that we have? Like I would say, taking your role first as a fiduciary to the library. To me, the first question is, we have access to these resources. How can we most effectively deploy them? And can we do something? And how are we going to measure it? I mean, we're going way deep now, right?
That's okay.
How can we measure, right? Valerie comes to you with a plan. We can increase our youth spending by 200, by Y. Okay, there's no numbers here. We can increase our youth spending by Y. And if we do this, we can accomplish something.
Z, yeah.
Z, all right? Then I think it is completely valid for you as a board a year later to say, how are we moving towards Z? Did it work? Did, these things that we wanted to have happen? And if not, then you can reevaluate. Maybe we misjudged or whatever it is.
With the budget last year, we had concerns because of what the levy for that was.
Yep.
So therefore, there were things we cut that we thought we were asked for. Seriously, if we see there's going to be money, we can maybe pick up some of the things we cut because we were concerned about how low the other levy was and we didn't want to overspend.
Well, and that's part of my job, talking to the
Yes,
staff, talking to
yes,
the community,
yes, I
figuring
agree.
out.
Right.
Mhm.
But I'm just saying, there was a lot that we cut. I can think of one that I said, let's cut and put it for next year, that was 90,000. So there's things we can pick up that we put aside because of the levy we had for that amount of time.
But at the same token, we do have X in reserves that we can use as well.
Yes, for certain things. You cannot use the reserve for everything. You can only use the reserve for building and Rich, is it operational expenses? Isn't it just pretty much building, like, say if the
Jamie, can
So,
you
yeah,
answer that
I
question?
can
Jamie?
answer
Oh,
that
I'm
question.
sorry.
And we're getting into the weeds.
I'm sorry.
Right, so we want to bring it back up, but just real quick, that special reserve has to be supported by a special reserve spending plan.
I wasn't talking about
Yes.
special
Thank
reserve.
Oh, okay.
I was talking about the general fund.
Oh, general fund.
General fund is everything.
Unrestricted, yeah, and so
And that's what I'm saying, we could dip into some of the general fund. if
you
we
could
needed to as well.
intentionally spend down special reserve if you wanted to, if you felt, if you came to the conclusion after all your strategic planning. Remember, I'm always gonna come to this from the perspective of you being a fiduciary to the library,
Yes.
right? First, it's kind of like you know, when you can't figure out how to not respectfully, how to responsibly spend the money, the resources that you have available to you, then you can responsibly talk about, well, we're really levying too much. You know, if you want to run this library at the minimum cost possible, I'm sure you can figure out how to have a skeleton crew here, cut your hours. You know, you can always get the taxes down, but that wouldn't be being a fiduciary to the library. Right?
True.
You wouldn't be
True.
serving the library.
Absolutely, but
Okay.
if your general fund is also growing X million
Then you
year
might,
over
you
year.
might come to the conclusion, and I'll give you the other side of that, right, is, again, we're getting a little weeds, so we would keep moving, but you have to look at that special reserve and what's coming down the pike. Like, let's say $10 million in, which I think you have somewhere along that line, so I can actually use that
Yeah.
number, in fund balance, and your special reserve is 3, but there's a $6 million project coming up in 4 years. I just made that up. Okay?
No,
Then you
You have to
have to
build that,
know,
yes.
you have to look ahead, because otherwise you say, okay, let's give 8 of that $10 million back, and then 6 years from now you go like, what do we do now? We can't do it.
technically, I didn't think we could. I thought special reserve, once it's there, unless we're
You can't
spending
take-
it on things that can come out of.
Yes, no,
special
you're
reserve.
exactly right. What I was talking about was that, again, that general fund.
General
Which
fund,
is not
okay.
restricted.
Right.
Once it's in, it's in.
Yes,
It ain't, it's not
no,
going out.
and I
of separate
understand,
capital.
but the way it was stated, I was questioning whether you were talking about
Yeah, yeah,
special
yeah.
reserve.
So we clarified, right?
And one of the
Thank you.
things we're gonna be working on is a capital improvement plan and a technology improvement plan for the library to try and do some projections for how we would spend our special reserves.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, so good. I think we're good here. So let's just talk about the budget. I think I covered this already earlier. Budget and appropriation origin, the appropriation's different from the budget appropriation. Yeah, we covered all this. Okay, so you'll see in your budget and appropriation, you have 2 columns for the budget and the appropriation. Okay, let's talk about the levy a little. And I think you're already pretty educated on the levy. But I think some history is actually very interesting here, and I just want to make sure we have language, that we're all using the same language. You have the levy, which is what you ask for. The levy is what you put in for each year and you pass the levy ordinance. The extension is what actually goes on the tax bills. And the difference is, when the county gets your levy, they have to go through a whole mess of calculations. They figure out what the maximum you can levy is, and they can extend is, and if you've exceeded that with your levy, then everything gets cut back to the maximum extension. If you're under, they'll go ahead and extend what you levied. Okay, so when I talk about levy, I'm gonna try, I usually do it pretty well. Levy is what you're asking for, extension is what actually is on the tax bills. And then, of course, you collect, right? Just because it's on the tax bills, some people don't pay their taxes, so you get collections. In your case, your collection rate's gonna be pretty close to 100%. Whoops. So it can seem pretty complicated, this whole levy thing, but it's actually very, very simple if you don't want to do it, go through the math that's behind it. Conceptually, it's really simple. In your case, usually it's the prior year extension, but in your case, it's the maximum extension from the last 3 years because you did lower your levy. So you take the maximum extension from your last 3 years, which was 7,209,000. You have to go back. You had to go back 3 years last year to get that. Otherwise, if you waited one more year,
We
you
wouldn't
would
have
have
been
been
able to.
permanently lower by about $2 million. We'll see those numbers in a second. And you get to increase that by inflation or 5%, whichever is last year that was 5%. So you got an automatic increase this year, 24 or 23 for 22 of 5%. Okay, so this is last year's levy. The 23 is the one you filed last year. And then you get to tax new property, things that weren't actually there the prior year, like a new store that didn't exist, a new home, a new business, a new building. You get to tax that at your tax rate. You've generally had almost no new property going back several, which is kind of weird. You're built out. You know, a lot of places it's 1% or 2%. You're running around 0.1% for new property. So that's almost worth nothing to you. And so if you go through that math, your maximum extension that you could project for this coming year for the 23 levy is about just under 7.6 million, is about where I think you'll come out. And because you levied that, you levied 7.568, a little bit less, you'll get pretty close to that this year. You'll get, you know, if the number comes out to 7.581, you'll get your 7.568. And then there's other add-ons as well, but basically you're getting that 7.568. So again, had you not done that last year, you would have, and it sounds like you're familiar with that. Okay. Now, here's what's interesting. So I went back and I looked in history. I went back to 2006, but for this chart, I just went back to 2018. You've consistently levied below the maximum. Like, this has been your practice almost every year. And so I just wanted you to see how much you under levied in each year. So you can see your levy request there, the calculation of the maximum extension, and then the actual extension, and that doesn't match, you know, the lesser of your levy because they're adding in some other things. They're doing some other things here that aren't worth explaining. But you can see your actual extension was below the cap every year since 2018. And if you look at the cumulative impact of under levying, right, in 2022, you could have levied as much as $8.3 million. Okay, and you levied 5.1. So in terms of like giving money back to the community, you've done a lot of that. I just want to make that point, right? The community can't be upset about, you know, you guys trying to take every last penny. You've done that. And now on the bottom, cumulatively, right? Because this stuff compounds. 1 year's levy adds up to the next. Over the last 5 years, 22, you were cumulative $3 million under what you could have levied. And then you took some of it back in 23. So now 1187 is basically what you're less in 2023 relative to what you could have been. And that's locked in. Now, because you caught up on those 3 years, now every year is going to be the prior year, unless you go down again. So you can't get that $1.187 million back. You can go to the community and say, hey, we've saved you forever.
Yes,
$1.2 million.
Yeah, I was on the board when that happened once before, so I knew, so I was saying, hey, and yeah, we were smart enough to go for it.
Yeah, but you've locked in for taxpayers 1.2 million the last 5 years. If you go back to 2006, you've levied below the cap 13 out of the last 18 years.
Yes.
Kind of interesting. If you levied at the cap every year, you'd be at 10.6 million. Okay, so again, you've locked in for taxpayers basically $1.8 million of savings. You know, that's not on their tax bills and never will be. So, so you can say, listen, we've been responsible with your money, we've looked after it, you know, but we also want to look after the library as well.
Well, that's what we're hired to do.
Yeah, well, you want to be responsible.
Exactly.
But again, I'm going to keep coming back from my perspective, which I hope to convey to be yours, to be fiduciaries to the library.
Oh, definitely.
First and foremost. Okay. So again, how long are we in this? We lost track of what we talked, but we'll keep moving along. We've gotten ahead of the game as well a little bit. Okay, so where are you in terms of a library board, right, holding the ladder on the levy? So number one, what is my fiduciary responsibility to the library with respect to setting the levy? Can we responsibly spend the money that's available to us? And when you can't, that's the time to start looking at, are we levying too much? But when you can, I think your fiduciary responsibility is to take advantage of it. Have we properly ascertained the likely maximum tax extension available to us? You just want to make sure you've done that correctly, that the library director's done her homework about figuring out what new property is and things like that. Can the library director responsibly make use of all the taxes afforded to us, right? If she can't, then you look at it differently. What would be the long-term implications of taking less than the maximum tax allowable? That's where this projection that we're going to talk briefly about comes in. Okay, you can't do this on a year-by-year basis, you know, or you're not taking into account a long-term strategic view. There's a legal change which I'm just going to mention here that occurred, I think, 1 to 2 years ago. where libraries can now file a certificate of reduction, it has a couple different names, I think, where you file your levy, and then you also file within 60 days of this certificate of reduction with the county clerk that says, we didn't levy everything we could. In the future, please do the calculation as though we had. Right? You understand
And
what I'm
what
saying?
does that do for us?
And so what that means is, you're not, right now, you've tied all future boards' hands to that 1.8 million or 1.2 million, whatever it is, dollar
Yeah.
reduction in taxes. If that had been available under the law from we'll say from 2018, right? And you had taken advantage of it, right? You would always have this, and the calculation that the county would have done would have followed that continuous levy at the cap.
So it would
The
have been
second line.
possible for
So
us to
it
have
would have
that
been
10.6?
possible, well, if you went all the way back to
If we went all the way back,
2006, but for 2018, would have been possible, because you filed that certificate every year, that if some future board said, hey, we really need to get to 8.7, they could do it. So you wouldn't be tying, which you might decide as a board you want to do, you don't care, but I'm just saying, you wouldn't be tying future boards' hands. Now,
But
this
how
only
long
came
can
in
they
forever.
do- Forever?
Forever, yeah. They have to do it forever. It's kind of like, I think it's
So
a real annoyance
every-
for the county clerk.
Every time you do a levy, 60 days after you should do this.
You would always preserve your ability to go up.
Okay.
But I suspect, well, and I don't know the nuances of the law, but if you skip a year, right, they'll probably hold to the prior year, right? You know,
Okay.
or whatever, but it hasn't been around for long enough for anybody to really know exactly.
Okay, that's
how it
very
works.
interesting.
But that would be a placeholder then for future boards if they decided they needed additional dollars. And we don't talk about that too much, but I think to me, it would be a best practice. Just, it gives you flexibility with no obligation. So,
Yeah, because you never know what might come up in the future.
but this just came into play, I think, 1 to 2 years ago. Okay, so those are your concerns, and I think we covered the library director's concerns, so we don't have to beat that dead horse. Okay, let's talk about fund balances a little bit. And again, you're a pretty well-educated board, so so we don't have to spend too much time on this. But remember, when you levy, you're levying in various funds, right? You're levying for your general fund, you're levying for building and maintenance, social security, all these different items. When you levy for a specific purpose, other than the general fund, that money is restricted. You can only use that money for the specific purpose, and you have maximum tax rates for some of those funds, specifically audit and building and maintenance. You can't levy more than 2 cents. Now, it doesn't really matter because you have an aggregate maximum that you can levy, right? So it's just where you're putting that money. But as you put money into those restricted funds, it's not coming out again. So you want to keep your funds balanced. You can see there's a maximum rate on the general fund of 60 cents. You're nowhere near it. You know, you could not levy in any of those funds and still not exceed the maximum, and only levy in the general fund and not exceed the maximum rate. That would be fine. But I like the flexibility of keeping track of specific money and what it's for. I like that. And then, and you can see your, you can see your rates is in the 22
Now-
rate column there.
I'm looking at this, this is what we levied, this isn't what we have in the fund.
Correct.
Because
This
I'm
is-
looking under unemployment fund.
Yeah, we're gonna get there in a minute.
Okay,
Yeah, so,
Sorry,
so
I'm
you
asking
didn't
ahead of
levy,
time.
you didn't levy for unemployment, okay? So, just that, or you levied like $100.
yeah, so I mean, if we go above that, we
He didn't leave
use,
because he's bored.
we use
No.
our general fund.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's no big deal.
All right.
That's
and-
what I thought.
And so one of the questions is, do we have too much money, right? Like you're asking these questions, do we have too much money? And too much money has never been specifically defined, right? But there is sort of a general rule that's applied called the Miller Rule based on a court case that was filed a long time ago. And again, there's different ways of thinking about the Miller Rule, but the Miller Rule says that the fund balance, right, we go back to that fund balance, it's not really cash on hand, but it's, well, I can't remember how you do your accounting, but it's something, you know, anyway, I'm not even gonna say because I don't remember how you do your accounting. Anyway, is that your fund balance can't exceed twice your annual expenditures. Okay? And if you do, then you could get a tax protest. It's not like a law, you can't do it, and it's just generally, if the fund balance exceeds that, someone could object to your levying in that fund for an amount of money. Doesn't happen very often in libraries because the amounts of money are small. But best practices, right? You don't want to spend amass too much money. And then depending on how you do it, you can either include or exclude levied but uncollected amounts. So right now we're halfway through the year. You've levied for a certain amount of money, but you still haven't collected what's coming in September. One way to do the calculation is to include that money. Another way is to not. So before I show you that calculation, I also want to point out, right? You have those limits on all those funds. Does not apply to the special reserve, right? Because the special reserve, even though it's a restricted fund, is where you accumulate money for projects that aren't in the next year. So it makes perfect sense that you would want to amass or accumulate an unspecified amount of money in that fund, or a specified amount of money that doesn't relate to an expenditure, right? So we have that as our
For building, whatever,
And
improvements.
that's why we move surpluses into special reserves,
But
right?
you
To
gotta have a
plan for
plan to
those
spend.
projects.
Yep, you gotta,
Yep.
and that's where your capital needs assessment is gonna come in. So we can say in good faith, yes, we intend to spend that money, or we need it for this reason. Okay, so here's your Miller rule calculation. Okay, without the uncollected taxes and with the uncollected taxes. Okay, so just kind of see where you're at. So we can start answering this question, do we have too much money? So right now you're holding $10 million in your fund balance, okay, and uncollected levy, $4 million. If you look at the 23 expenditures of $4.6 million, because we're doing this fund by fund, right? So even though you spent like 5 million something, right, 4.6 was coming from general fund. Miller rule comes out to somewhere between 200% and 300%. So you could say, we kind of, those balances are pretty healthy, right? And that's where you start asking the question, okay, what needs are there on that money? Is our special reserve sufficiently funded? Can we responsibly, whatever, I don't want to answer the question, but you might think about that, right? And again, this is not a condemnation in any way. It's just saying, okay, this is saying in this fund, we have money that can be considered very healthy. What's our plan for that money? How do we most responsibly use it? You also
Jim, I
have like,
a quick question first. Sorry, I had to step out for a second. What do you mean by Miller without and Miller with?
so
understand that.
so Miller, there's this Miller rule. I go really.
Yeah, right. I
Yeah.
read through
Miller,
it, so. Yeah, I
Miller
understand.
without is not including uncollected taxes, and Miller
Oh, got
with
it.
would be
Okay.
including
Okay,
uncollected
got it.
taxes. And then those other funds, you're getting close. Unemployment insurance is 438%. Oh my goodness! But we're talking about $32,000. It's like it doesn't even matter. The one that really adds up to anything of substance would be the general fund, right? And you can say, but first I would look at the special reserve and say, and it could be something like, honestly, if Valerie had a vision for redoing a space, right? You say, this is all
Yeah, that's where you
big
put
picture,
special
deeper
reserve.
stuff, lots of meetings.
Yeah,
Before you come to the conclusion, you just flat out have too much money. Okay. All right, so fund balance concerns from your perspective, board, big picture. Are they appropriate to our needs? Do they provide adequate protection against emergencies, like the year that taxes came in 4 months late, right? If you skinnied those balances down where you needed to get a cash flow loan when you didn't really need to, why? Do our fund balances provide for known future needs as well as for unknown future needs, right? Do we have a cushion? Strategic priorities that could be met by deploying some of those reserves. That was the question I was asking about, like reimagining space. Do our reserves create opportunities to serve the community better? Again, as fiduciaries to the library, you're thinking about how can we serve the community? We have this
Yes.
money, how do we use it? Okay. Primary fund balance, the library director is sitting there thinking at a deeper, at a little more granular levy. Am I levying across my funds appropriately to maintain proper balances? Sometimes we'll see a negative fund balance in one fund and then a huge balance in another. It's like just someone wasn't watching, right? Am I maintaining at least a healthy fund and cash balance? To me, you want to be 6 to 12 months of cash. Just good proof you can get some interest earnings, things like that. What capital needs might be coming that require use of the reserves or the special reserve? What opportunities are there to use available fund balances? All those things we've already talked about. That's what she's doing, right? She's thinking about that. Okay, we're getting to the end. This is not as bad as I thought. Policy determination. I mean, in terms of length. That's all I was referring to.
I
That was it.
understood that,
Okay,
thank you.
good. Policy determination is the board's power and duty. So again, thinking big picture, right? It's really those policies that guide everything. You should take advantage of your policies. They're there for a reason. Past boards have worked on those policies. They've thought about them. So they're really the institutional memory of the organization. You can see what decisions people have made by looking at those policies and going back through. That's not to say they're written in stone. It's not the Constitution of the United States, right? But people have thought about this stuff. Why do they come to these decisions?
That can be amended too.
You can imagine that. What's that?
I said that can be amended too.
That can be amended too. Clear guidance as to how given situations should be addressed, as they arise. Someone says, well, I'll give one. You get a donation of an artwork. What are we going to do with that? Well, start by looking at the gift policy, right? Probably has some guidance there for you. What you can do. Delegate responsibility, so it's clear who should be doing what, right? A lot of these policies will say this specific function is the responsibility of this person or this role, or you're going to have this title to take care of these responsibilities, right? And in that way, it protects both the employees and the board members. Why? Because if someone says you didn't do this right, you point to the policy and say, absolutely 100% I did. The policy says right here, that's my responsibility and that's my job. And if it doesn't, and they go, oh, AWOL, right? You can say, you violated the policy, we got to do something. Okay, so that's what the policies are there for. And that's protection. It's protection for employees, it's protection for board members. It also avoids confusion and blame, because nobody's sitting around, well, I can do that. No, you can't. Yes, I can. No, you can't, right? And lastly, they promote and reflect the culture of the policy, of the culture of the library, and some examples of that would be, how you handle homeless. What types of books you bring in, things like that, right? Mm-hmm. That's guidance. Are we welcoming? Are we exclusionary? Do we go out of our way? What do we do? Okay. So in terms of financial policies, and page one, but we're getting to that. Financially responsible board, financial policies now. You want to have an investment policy. I think you have most of these. We do. A gift policy, fund balance policy, travel and expense reimbursement policy. Mm-hmm. Financial controls aren't so much a policy as mandated by policy, that you have lines of authority for paying bills and use of credit cards and entering contracts. And that's where Valerie comes in, is to make sure those policies are in place and are followed. Separation of duties, so you can't have one person writing checks and cashing them at the same time, or approving bills and writing checks at the same time. Maintenance of records, conflicts of interest, what did we spend that on? Oh, let's go back and look. And, periodic review of policies and compliance monitoring. You once in a while, you check in on those policies. Do we follow this? And that's where you're going to lessen the likelihood of fraud, right? Mm-hmm. You're never going to catch fraud by asking about, or very rarely, by asking about a specific payment or a specific bill. That's not how it's going to happen.
No.
It's going to happen when you've got financial controls in place and they weren't followed. So you want to know about the controls rather than the specific payment. So let's take a quick look. Here's your fund, I think it is, yeah. Here's your fund balance policy. Let's just take this for an example. Again, not picking on anything, just, okay, purpose. Okay, and it's good policy, right? I think a lot of your policies are well thought out. It's just whether you look at it. Purpose of the fund balance policy is established to provide financial stability, cash flow for operations, and the assurance that the library will be able to respond to emergencies with fiscal strength. Okay, so there's your guidance.
Sounds
And
great.
you should be asking these questions in that context when you approach your policies. Okay, general fund balance. The fund balance target should represent at least 6 months of operating expenditures. Great. You're there, right? We just saw it was like 200. Balances above the 6 month target may be transferred to the special reserve fund. And if we go to the special reserve fund, capital projects are funded through the special reserve fund. I'd like some more specificity here to say how much money should be in the special reserve fund. Special reserve fund balance should be sufficient to take care of anticipated capital expenditures, whatever, right? There's nothing in there about what accumulates in the special reserve fund. It just says,
No.
you can transfer that to the special reserve fund.
But you know
Like a
what?
little more specificity.
But actually,
It's just
what we
okay.
used to have, I believe we still do, we used to get reports from 2 companies that came out every 3 years. So I'm thinking we are at the tail end of these reports. And what they did is the 2 companies came out and did an evaluation. One was about, like the building structure and everything we needed. Another one was about the contents and technology, and
Yep.
it's all planned for
Perfect.
like so many years, but this new board has not discussed that or even brought it up.
Yeah.
So it does exist. You may have found it maybe, but I brought it, you have not.
No, you told me about it, I have not found it.
We've had,
Okay, well, I
we've
can,
had 3 directors since the new board came in. So we have to give this director a chance to establish stuff. We can't just say, well, it should be. We're working towards this stuff.
But that
And-
is important, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Go
But
ahead.
with 3 different directors, I mean, there's,
Yeah, so, but as a starting point, right, you dig this thing up and you
Yeah.
see,
yes,
and that shouldn't change, as long as it was responsibly done, right?
yeah,
You
absolutely.
didn't necessarily like call it in, you could look at that and say, well, they obviously missed this, or something like that. But it's a good starting point, right? I mean, you spent money on this thing. It's probably a starting point to at least look and start saying, do we have enough?
Well, and I did just talk to Rich.
Um,
Rich is aware of these plans, and
Yes,
we're going to
he
be
is.
discussing them during the budgeting process.
So you'll be
Well,
able to
yeah,
see
I
that
remember
information.
hearing you
Yeah, 'cause
talk-
I mentioned his name last time.
I remember hearing you talk about the fact you're trying to go into the figure what will be needed into the future.
That's what a capital improvement plan and a
Yes.
technology improvement plan entails. I don't know which companies we've used in the past, but I'll definitely investigate which companies
But-
they are or
But we
look for
can't
other
expect
companies.
that before the budget is,
No, we'll just have to estimate what that might cost.
Yeah. so it's coming. It's not like it's not planned for.
But going back to what you were saying, Jamie, for special reserve funds, you're not saying set a specific amount of money we want in there, but to, in the policy, state that we're going to have potentially a capital improvement plan or a technology.
Exactly, I'd be sort of general about it, but, yeah, I'd be intentional by, capital projects are funded, but we want that fund to be healthy and sufficient to take care of foreseen needs, and maybe some unforeseen ones too, and potential. All right, and then you have your, special revenue funds, which are all those other restricted funds, those little ones,
Those
and
little
all that.
things.
Have a targeted fund balance between 3 and 6 months of expenditures, fine, because, it doesn't really matter with those. You can always transfer money into them if you need it. If you overspend, you can make up
Take
the
it out of
difference.
general
Can I ask
fund.
Joe a question about special revenue?
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion, one way or the other, about having those little funds transferred into the general fund?
Can't do it. They're restricted.
I
You'd
would,
have to spend them down. You could, you could eliminate them is effectively
Okay.
what you do. You just spend them down over the years and not put more money into them. It goes back to this thing.
right, well,
It goes back to this, okay, so, and the weirdness of the unpredictability, and if I'm jumping ahead of your question,
that's
stop me,
fine,
just say
no, go
you're
right
not
ahead.
answering
No,
my
no, it's
question.
fine.
Illinois law governs what you can levy and, wrong one, governs what you can tax and where you can put stuff. And they could just as easily say, you know, well, they could take that limit that's on the general fund, which is 60 cents right now, and say, you know what, we're gonna make it 20 cents. We don't like that anymore.
And that would affect
Right.
those funds.
And then all those other funds, if you hadn't been levying for those funds, you would have no flexibility.
I
You'd
see
be
what you're
limited
saying.
by the 20. So what's the difference?
Well, I was,
half of it,
because
you know.
I was told by a former accounting auditor, actually, that we should do that because it would save this extra, like, accounting work. But
Well,
never was
Yeah.
I
It's
told
gonna save him
that
work.
we were going to lose, you know, we could possibly lose that percentage. So I get it. I
You
definitely would
could.
not move them then.
And it's not like it
Good point.
eliminates the need for the fund balance, because you still want fund balance
Right.
against those expenses. So,
Sure.
I mean,
But we're being
I-
held at account according to what the state decides. And if they decide to, like he says, switch things around, we might be cutting our nose to spite
Yeah.
our face.
so I just think it's flexibility. Fine, you account for it anyway.
Thanks for
You
that.
book this stuff to these lines anyhow. It's no
Sure.
more work. You know, maybe the accountant's like, I gotta make 5 columns in my audit, and that's. a
No,
pain
but
in the
never
neck.
was the point that if there was a decrease in the percentage, it would affect all of that.
That could,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
So anyway, so I used to be of that mind that hey, why bother, just consolidate them all, and then I thought about this, and I like this line of reasoning a little bit better.
That's a good reason.
Okay, so your policy concerns with respect to policies. Number one, are we reviewing our policies according to our policy, right? A lot of policies, like we review our policies every couple of years. Have you done it? You know, I don't know. Again, I don't know the answer to the question. Do our policies conform to the law, which is why attorneys should look at your policies, you know, I think they're helpful. Policies encompass our vision for the library, like this is a reflection of your strategic plan. Policies reflect the culture we wish to instill along the lines of what we were talking about. And do they give appropriate latitude to administrative authority, right? You know, does your administrators have the power now to do what they need to do to run the library effectively? And from the director's standpoint, obviously it's implementation. Am I following the policies? Are there aspects to policies that are obsolete or out of date, just don't make sense anymore given what's happening with libraries? Do I have sufficient direction in those policies to guide me, or am I at risk of like getting the ire of the board because I did something they didn't like because I lacked direction? And then are there policies we're missing? I didn't notice any off the top of my head. It seemed like you're pretty complete. Okay, and then lastly, putting it all together, you're not there, but it's not hard to do. Turn that budgeting process into a forecast, you know, so that you can see long-term where you're headed. So you take that negative 1.4 million and you say, well, that's not sustainable. We can't possibly do that. But it would combine with the next year's 7 million and say, oh, wait a minute, we got more money than we need. And it would combine with 3 years ago when you were already spending 7 million, but cut it back to 5 and say, you know, you can see that perspective, and that projection helps you plan. Further out you project, the less useful it is, but it can identify trends and help you establish those kind of
And to
those
be
strategies.
clear, these are not our numbers.
Oh, yeah,
on
yeah,
the
yeah,
site.
absolutely. These are not your numbers.
These
They're
are
just a
numbers you're
random,
using,
yeah, random library. Thank you for pointing. I appreciate-
because yes,
appreciate that.
they'll
Yeah,
come
I
back
was,
and we'll get told about it.
Yeah.
Yes,
them
no,
wondering.
no, thank you. I thought about putting draft, but I didn't want what I put up here to be different from what was in the book, and anyway, okay, yes. These are not your numbers. This is interesting, because this particular library, you can see, if you're just, because it is instructive, we're maintaining their fund balance at 70%. Okay, so, and everything else, you see that transfers line, third up? Everything else is going annually into the special reserve. And this is a situation where, look, we're putting like $2 million, that's a ton of money. So this is one of those rare situations where we might say, you can't possibly spend that much. Maybe we need to think about
Well,
what we're doing
especially if we
with our
don't
cash.
have a projected what we plan on doing with it. That's why this projected thing, like, you know, if we do want to do some remodeling, we haven't done any in this library for years and years and years.
Yeah.
I think it's close to 15. And so therefore, realistically, things need to be improved.
And libraries have changed a lot. as you know,
Yes.
in those 15 years. And they're used in person now. Well, Valerie can say much better, but they're used as a public space. I think way more, you know, it's just not where you get books anymore. You know, they're
Yes.
so much more. Okay, so we're home stretch here. In summary, you guys are holding the ladder, right? So that the library can function effectively. And it might even be a board tactic, if I go out on a limb here to say, you know, when you find yourself going into details to say, we gotta hold the ladder, like, we're climbing the ladder now, right? You know, let's make sure we're holding the ladder. Month by month, you're looking at budget versus actual, just, we're not doing a deep dive here, it's just, you know, a glance, you'll see it's the board report, and just, does it all look right? How are your investments doing, right? Are we being smart? And it looks like you are, because 400,000, 500,000 in interest earnings is great. It suggests you really have that stuff invested. Take care of your actions requiring board approval, your B&A and your levy and your building and maintenance levy, things like that. Occasionally, you're gonna, or regularly, I would say, review policies, establish that strategic plan, become informed on implementation, those little mini sessions where you have someone come in and sort of tell you about what's going on in the library, or answer specific questions in a concentrated manner that you might have. And then very rarely, right, very rarely, and this is the main point, this is going up the ladder, review, overrule, or become involved with any administrative responsibility, right? Let your administrators do the job, otherwise you're going up the ladder. And that's it.
Thank you
So
very much.
happy with
Thank
any
you.
questions you might
I-
have.
Thank you very much.
Did, even though I've been on the board second longest that's sitting here, I feel I've gotten stuff out of this, so thank you.
Good. I'm
Thank you
glad.
very much.
It's the whole-
Thank you.
I have a
Full
couple
objective. Yes,
questions.
please.
All right, and actually, it started with the agreement that was
Okay.
emailed to me, and I guess I need clarification. We're not a municipality, and we're a library district, and all of us have been elected, and we have a fiduciary responsibility. What I was
Spoken, you're gonna
concerned
tell me
about
that
was
municipality and their-
your fiduciary responsibility sounds like it overrides ours, and that's not what you meant,
No,
correct?
that's completely different. So my fiduciary responsibility,
Mm-hmm,
I'm a financial
To us.
advisor.
mm-hmm,
Actually, my regulatory financial duty has to do with bonds. So technically, I'd say I don't have there's no official requirement that I have a fiduciary to you, but I maintain a fiduciary standard towards you. I'm thinking about the library as my client
mm-hmm.
and putting, all it means, when I have a fiduciary responsibility, it has nothing to do with your fiduciary responsibility.
Okay,
Two
I was
completely
trying to
different
clarify
things.
that.
My
Okay.
fiduciary responsibility is simply that I put your interest above my own.
About, yes, okay.
That's it.
That sounds great.
That's exclusively.
Okay,
what
then it mentioned that the work product, which is the spreadsheets or the presentation, are all confidential and proprietary.
Yeah, so the reason for that is, and it really I started doing that, you know, a couple of years into the business, and the reason for that is a lot of what I do is spreadsheets
Mm-hmm.
that I might share with you, and there's a lot of formulas that I work very, very hard on those things. So if I share a spreadsheet with a client, right, I want to know that it's not just going to go like out to the world and then everybody can use all the work to create their own projection, right? I want to protect that. So I make that proprietary. You know, but first of all, I can waive it, you know, easily enough.
Can I
Like this
just
is
tell you where-
posted, so,
Can I just
you
tell you
know,
where I'm
that's
coming
obviously
from?
public.
Okay,
Yeah.
as elected trustees, you know, when we talk about budget and levies and what have you, the residents expect us to answer questions and to explain why we're doing what we're doing. I totally understand your aspect of spreadsheets and
Yeah, and that's really
formulas
the
and all
scope,
that
yeah.
hard work, I get it. But to not be able to have these conversations and say, well, we're looking at this and that, I mean, that's kind of limiting.
Yeah, again, that is nothing, it's not the intent of what that is.
Okay.
And I don't,
Well,
I wouldn't
I'm
read
thinking-
it that way. If there's, like, give me the language
Well,
that
it
you're reading
says,
and then we'll like.
Meristem's work product analysis spreadsheets and presentations are confidential and proprietary, are not to be shared with any other party. And then my position was this restriction conflicts with my obligation
No,
to
you can
discuss.
take, no,
Okay.
that's not where I'm going. What I'm going is
Thank
like,
you.
and you asked specifically, could we make this public? yes, because
Well, then I
I'm
thought
really
if you're
more.
having a
Yeah, it's
presentation,
public.
okay,
Yeah,
thank
no.
you.
I'm more
Sorry, I
talking
was
about,
confused.
my real concern there is that, you know, someone doesn't, like, I would not want someone to take this presentation and then go give it
No, I
somewhere else,
totally, I
you know?
totally
Or take my
understand that.
spreadsheet and say,
Sure.
oh, hey, Sarah,
Yeah,
this spreadsheet,
absolutely, and
just
then
plug
she
in your
soars.
numbers and we're good to go.
No, no,
That's
I
really
get it.
all that's at.
And then my last question was, I didn't see specific services that you're gonna provide for our library.
It should be there.
Well, there's a scope of 17
Yeah.
services.
Yeah,
And when I went through them, honestly, 9 of them are essential to our library. There are things that we do or we need, but 8 of them are already
Yeah.
being provided to the
So,
library.
and that's fine. So I think if you look at the language, it says, like the lead into the scope of services says, I'll do all these things as requested by the library. Like if you don't ask for them, I'm not gonna do them. They're
Okay.
available,
Do we
right?
have anything that we're planning to utilize your services with that we know for certain?
Yeah,
I mean, I thought I thought the purpose of this was actually for our director who's new and needed all this budgeting information because it's a different type
Yeah,
of
so.
library. So I got that.
Yep.
But then
Sorry, I
moving
should let you
forward,
finish.
no. But then moving forward, I don't know what our direction is because, you know, and as you know, we have an accounting firm, an investment banker, a
Yeah,
law
sure.
firm. So I'm trying to figure out how do I look to the future with your service?
So, yeah, so a couple things to say about that. One is, I think Valerie doesn't necessarily know how she's gonna use me, necessarily. Maybe I'm
So-
going to, well,
Specifically,
hang on,
okay.
so a couple things first. So first, right, there's a limitation in this contract, right? So we
Yes.
automatically have a cap. So you know we hit the
I'm
$5,000
not worried
cap.
about that.
We're not going beyond that.
Sure.
So anything beyond that would be renewed, you'd be
Mhm.
aware of it and informed. In terms of what it is, right, so tonight you got a sense of a little bit of the scope, like everything I talked about, the projections,
Yes.
budget, levy, these are all things I
The
do,
process,
anything
yeah.
related. If that's something like, and it's outlined in the scope of services, what those things are. I don't only do them if requested. Like I'd never do something for Valerie and then she'd go like, wait, you never asked me
Oh, no,
that.
and I
So-
didn't.
So it comes down to her figuring out,
What,
what
okay, so
what
right
I'm
now, we
useful
don't know
for.
exactly.
So my plan,
Oops, sorry.
first and foremost of this contract is this training for the board and for us,
Yeah.
that's part of the contract. And then I am not having Jamie overlap with what Sickich does. Sickich is sending us projections like they do every year, and then I send that information to Jamie so he does not have to duplicate that work. And my plan is once I have an idea for the budget based on my conversations with all of the different department heads, I'm gonna sit down with Jamie, who has experience with all the other libraries that are listed in his statement of qualifications. And he can say, well, actually, one of the conversations we were having is what tactic to budget with. Do I try to budget for being staffed at 100% of what we expect to be staffed at? Or do we budget based on, usually you said, what, 94%, something like
For the
that?
staffing,
Potentially
right,
for
right, right.
staffing, because there's usually turnover at libraries. Those are the types of questions I'm gonna sit down with him and go over more specifics. Or he can look at the past 5 years of our library and tell me, okay, this is trending this way, this is trending that way. That's a service that Sickich does not provide for us. And so, I know the public comment earlier mentioned that we already have all these professionals, and you mentioned again, but it's different services that they provide. That Jamie's services are gonna work in tandem with Sickich, not overlapping. I'm not double paying for services. Sickich does not provide the advisement that Jamie can provide by working with other libraries to say, okay, Illinois library standards are that, for example, what we learned, up to 70% of the budget goes towards staffing levels potentially, and that type of thing. So he's gonna give me an overview after I talk to the department heads to see if we are being fiscally responsible based on the industry standards that he is familiar with.
Okay, so that's industry standards, but you will also consider our budgets for the past several years and our activity to,
Yeah, that's
To connect
absolutely
it all. Oh,
what I
okay.
mentioned as well.
all right, well,
Mhm.
good, well, thanks for that clarification.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Don't
much.
jinx it.
You are a pleasure
Good,
to have here and
Good, good.
very easy to listen to.
terrific. Well, hope to work with you more.
Thank you for
Yeah.
the, hanging in there in the beginning there with
Nope,
us.
thanks for
Yes.
having me out tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Or do we have other? Oh,
We have other.
I do actually want to make a comment there.
okay. Then I'm going to ask, I am going to leave at this point. I have to pick up a child, but you guys can proceed with other, and Vice President Trumbull can finish up the meeting. Thank you.
Okay. So we're ready for other?
Is there any other?
Yeah, I have a comment to make.
Trustee Kadir?
The step that was taken earlier in the meeting of a censure is something that is extraordinary and is not something that, I want to make very clear, is not something that was done because a particular trustee expressed an opinion that is different from others. We welcome all opinions to be heard. I certainly would not vote in the way I voted if it was a matter of a difference of opinion, even a heated difference of opinion. The reasoning that was, the reason for that censure was based on ad hominem attacks. And I know that.
I'm sorry,
that- Hold on.
I didn't
finish.
hear you.
Let me finish.
I
Was-
didn't hear, can you
He
Was
repeat
didn't-
based
She
on.
said she didn't
Oh, okay.
hear you.
Was based on ad hominem attacks, was based on what are essentially directed at the person as opposed to the person's ideas. And I know that trustee has experienced a lot of personal comments against her as well. I'm not trying to say there's not two sides of every coin. However, I think it's very important for all of us to recognize, continuing going forward, that we can disagree on ideas, we can disagree vehemently on ideas, but we should not personalize our disagreements to say this person is this way and this person is that way. That's just not appropriate for how we should operate as trustees. And honestly, it's, I feel like that's a slap in the face to all the voters who put us here, because they put us here to learn how to talk to each other, even if we don't agree. So I just wanted to share that in the other section. Feel free to disagree with me. I have no problem talking to anyone about anything, but I just wanted to make that very clear that it's not about ideas. It's about not going after people, and that we should be very clear that we don't go after people. And if anything that we do might be perceived as going after somebody personally, we should think twice and not say it.
Well, thank you for using me as your scapegoat for that situation, as you admitted that it's happened numerous times before as well to me. But I'm just reminding you that I would like a copy of the document you have that you claim are the list of comments that I made that are the basis of this.
I didn't have a document that said that. I
You
just
said
had a
you-
Then
document.
what
I
you
said,
did.
What she's asking you to do is go back.
I can go back. I said I had a document that went through the procedures of censure, that's all.
That you were reading
That
that
the
had to
only
do with the
thing- the
last
only-
meeting.
That I was doing from memory, not from, I wasn't
But
reading.
But you
didn't
just
make any
stated on the
statements.
tape.
No, what I stated was that she asked me what the basis were, so I mentioned it, and I said specifically, I'm going off memory, I don't have it in front of me.
You were reading a document.
The document I was reading was the procedures related to a censure of a board member,
If
that's
I
all.
could have a copy of that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, I got rid of the document, I gave it to, back to trustee Keene, but I will get you a copy.
Yeah, if you can print her up a copy.
Yeah.
I understand you wanting a copy of that.
Yeah, that's all that it was.
Well, I guess, fine.
Any other comments for other? With that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn
I second.
at 8:04 PM.
Okay, we have to do the roll.
I'm just
Whenever
writing
you're
it down.
ready, Precious.
Okay, Vice President Trunkel,
Yes.
Secretary Rosansky,
Yes.
Trustee Kadir,
Yes.
Trustee Derblick,
Yes.
Trustee Schoenfeld.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm turning the tape off.